My name is Alex Morgan. I'm 30 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've been the glue that holds my family together. Or at least, that's what I thought. I work in creative marketing, branding, design, a little event coordination, the kind of job that makes you everyone's go-to person when they want things to look perfect but don't want to pay for it. That's exactly the role I played when my younger brother Ryan was deployed overseas. I designed flyers for his fundraiser, helped Mia, his then-girlfriend, now fiancé, plan his birthday, Zoom from Kuwait, sent jerky care packages with cheesy motivational quotes tucked in the box. I knew his army number better than our dad probably did. But none of that mattered last Thursday, when Ryan's name popped up on my phone and shattered whatever illusion of importance I thought I had. The message was short, too casual, almost cowardly. Hey, just a heads up, parties this weekend. Guest list's tight, so we had to trim. Hope you understand. That was it. No emoji, no follow-up, nothing. Just a clinical exclusion, like I'd been uninvited to a group brunch. Not my own brother's welcome home party after 2 years away. I stared at the screen, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. I scrolled through our chat history, which was filled with things like "You're the best," "Couldn't have made it without you," "Can't wait to see you." All words, apparently, all cheap. I called Dad. Even though I knew what he'd say, the phone rang twice before his gravelly voice picked up. "Hey kiddo, what's up?" "Ryan just texted me," I said. "No small talk. I'm not invited to the party." There was a pause, a sigh, and then the line that would echo in my head for days. "Look, it's just a reunion. Don't blow it out of proportion." That word just stuck like a splinter under the skin. Just a reunion. I saw the Instagram story he posted earlier that day. More than 100 people tagged, college friends, high school buddies, Mia's Pilates instructor, for God's sake. But not me. Not the person who pulled him through deployment, who rewrote his damn enlistment letter when he chickened out of submitting the first draft. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I'm his sister. How does that not rate an invite?" Another sigh. "Don't make a scene. The venue's small. Space was tight." The word stung more than I expected. It wasn't just exclusion. It was erasure. I hung up, tossing my phone onto the couch like it had burned me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel sad. I felt done. Not the weepy kind of done. Not even the bitter kind. Just done in a way that made everything around me suddenly, eerily quiet. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine, and booked a trip to Colorado. If I wasn't family enough to get a seat at the party, I sure as hell wasn't going to sit at home sulking, while Ryan toasted with people who barely remembered his blood type. I'd be knee-deep in powder snow, somewhere in the Rockies, too far for a guilt trip and too busy for regrets. I scrolled through destinations like I was picking a new identity. Miami, too humid. Lake Tahoe, too obvious. But Breen Ridge, now that hit right. A cozy mountain lodge, slopeside cabins, hot tubs, and enough silence to drown out the Morgan family dysfunction. I booked the full package flight. Room, ski lessons, lift passes, first class, both ways. It was indulgent. Yes, but this wasn't a vacation. It was a message. To them. To myself. To that part of me that still wondered if maybe, somehow, I deserved this exclusion. Friday morning. I was packed and ready. The flight left at 6, and by 10 I'd be surrounded by snow instead of family lies. I scheduled a post to drop mid-flight, a photo of a boarding pass and the caption, "When you don't make the list, you make your own." No context, no need. Anyone who mattered would get it, or they'd stew trying. As I waited for the car to the airport, I got the first ping. "Mom, heard you're upset about the party. Dad says it's no big deal. Just come anyway, like I was some distant cousin being offered a pity chair." I didn't reply. Then came Ryan. "Dude, you're not seriously mad, are you? It's just a party?" No, it was never just a party. It was never about space. It was about value. I wasn't valuable. Not as a guest, not as a sister, just as a utility, a human buffer, a behind-the-scenes fixer who wasn't meant to take up room in the spotlight. I turned off notifications and stepped into the cab. As the city blurred past the window, I felt the first wave of freedom ripple through me. This wasn't escape, this was a declaration. They could have their reunion. I'd build my own memory, one where I wasn't background noise, one where I wasn't quietly useful and conveniently forgotten. At the airport, I sipped whiskey in the lounge, legs crossed, unbothered. The flight boarded on time, the seat cushioned and roomy. I stared out the window as we took off, the skyline fading behind me. And for the first time in years, Saturday morning arrived with a clarity that almost felt theatrical. Sunlight spilled through the cabin's large windows, casting golden stripes across the flannel blanket still tangled at my feet. The mountain air was sharp, crisp, and almost smug in how different it felt from the suffocating guilt I left back home. I stretched, rolled out of bed, brewed a mug of coffee, and padded out to the deck with a soft groan of satisfaction. Somewhere, 500 miles away, Ryan's party was kicking off. Streamers were being taped to walls. Cheap beer was chilling in tubs. And my absence? Oh, it was being noticed. I took a sip of coffee. The bitterness grounding. Today wasn't about escape. It was about reclamation. After breakfast, I headed to my first ski lesson. My instructor, a guy named Sam with sunburnt cheeks and the energy of a Labrador retriever, took one look at me and said, "You look like someone trying to forget a wedding." "Close," I muttered. "Family reunion." He laughed like he'd heard that before. We spent the morning working through the basic stance. Balance, not dying. I fell twice, cussed once, and by noon, I was gliding down a beginner's slope with the kind of unearned confidence only pure rage could manifest. When I stopped halfway to catch my breath, I snapped a photo snow-covered peaks behind me, skis buried in powder, cheeks flushed from the cold and exhilaration. I posted it with the caption, "Powder beats pity every time." Within minutes, likes and fire emojis trickled in. Cousin Tara replied with a string of claps. An old high school friend simply wrote, "Damn, living." Even my boss commented, "When you're back, we're getting drinks. You look free." I smiled, but only for a moment. Back at the cabin, the hot tub beckoned like a reward for surviving the emotional war zone that was my brain. I sank into the steaming water, every knot in my shoulders dissolving. My phone vibrated on the deck rail. I considered ignoring it. I should have, but curiosity has teeth. I reached over and tapped the screen. Messages. One from Mom. "Please don't make this bigger than it is. It's one night." One from Ryan. "You're being dramatic." Then another ping cousin Jess. Not the cool one. The condescending one. "Heard you're mad you didn't make the guest list, LOL. Awkward." And finally, a voice message from Dad. I didn't play it. I could hear it already, that tired sigh, that performative concern barely covering his loyalty to Ryan. I dropped the phone face down and slid deeper into the water, steam rising like armor. Later that evening, I wandered to the lodge bar, a rustic space with exposed beams, leather stools, and a local guitarist strumming something mellow near the fire. I ordered a whiskey neat and parked myself in the corner, letting the burn of the drink cut through the noise in my chest. A couple next to me, tourists from Seattle, struck up conversation. "Here, solo?" the woman asked. "Sort of," I said, swirling the glass. "Skipped a family thing?" Drama, the guy asked, half joking. "You have no idea," I replied with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. They raised their glasses. "To skipping what doesn't serve us." I clinked back. That sentence lingered like an echo in my bones. Sunday morning was colder. I pulled on gear, brewed coffee, and took the lift for a second round of lessons. This time a blue run, faster, steeper, more demanding. I pushed harder than I should have, carving the hill with reckless grace, chasing the quiet at the bottom of the slope. Halfway through the run, my phone buzzed in my pocket, persistent. I ignored it, flying past couples and teenagers, the wind biting my cheeks until I reached the bottom, flushed and breathless. Later, over lunch back at the cabin, I finally checked the screen. It was Tara. "You're missing a show. Call me." I dialed instantly, something tight twisting in my gut. "Okay," she said, voice low but electric. "Brace yourself." I leaned against the kitchen counter, gripping my sandwich like a lifeline. Mia caught Ryan flirting with his ex, at the party, in front of everyone. I blinked. "What?" "Yeah," she said, half laughing, threw her drink, stormed out. Total meltdown. Ryan got drunk, punched a wall, broke his hand. Party went nuclear, mom's crying, dad's yelling, guests bailed. I sat down, stunned, then burst into laughter. Not because it was funny, but because it was poetic. The irony settled in like warm whiskey. Ryan, the golden boy, the center of this entire weekend, had imploded under the weight of his own ego and without me there to cushion the fall. It all cracked wide open. My absence hadn't gone unnoticed. It had left a crater. And for once, I didn't feel guilty about it. I felt powerful. Another ping, mom again, please call me, Ryan needs you, then dad. This isn't funny anymore. You've made your point. Then, Ryan himself. This wouldn't have happened if you were here. You always calm me down. That one made my jaw clench. Calm him down. After he sliced me from the guest list. After dad told me not to take it personally, I didn't reply. I wouldn't. That night, I headed to the hot tub again, the steam curling up like a sanctuary against the chaos unraveling in a different zip code. I opened Instagram and posted another shot, mountains lit under dusk, bubbles rising around my knees. Caption, guess I picked the right weekend to disappear. Comments flooded in. But I didn't check. Let them talk. Let them twist themselves into knots trying to rationalize why I wasn't there to put out the fires they lit. As I dried off and curled into bed, the fire crackling low in the hearth, I realized something that startled me in its finality. I didn't want to go back. Not just from this trip, but from the role they'd always forced me into. The fixer, the forgotten one, the buffer. No more. The thought didn't scare me. It steadied me. And yet, even as I fell asleep to the distant howl of wind against the roof, I couldn't shake the feeling that the next day would bring something else, something bigger. Because when families fall apart, they never go quietly. Not mine. Anyway, Monday morning arrived with a sort of eerie calm. Snow slid off the cabin roof in slow, thudding chunks, like even the mountain itself was shedding some weight. I stayed in bed longer than usual, wrapped in blankets that smelled faintly of pine and fireplace smoke. There was no alarm, no itinerary, no reason to get up, at least none I cared about. I stared at the beams overhead, letting the heat from last night's soak linger in my muscles while my phone sat charging on the nightstand. Silent and untouched, but silence doesn't mean peace, not in my family. Eventually, curiosity tugged. I padded over to the phone, unlocked it, and braced myself. Dozens of missed notifications lit up the screen like flares from a sinking ship. Texts from mom, from dad, even one from Mia. Please, Claire, Ryan's a mess. I don't know what to do. Another from dad. You abandoning your family when we need you the most is unacceptable. And then Ryan. Of course, with the real masterpiece. This wouldn't have happened if you were here. You always calm me down. Thanks for nothing. The gall was impressive. The same brother who left me off the guest list without a blink now wanted me to shoulder the blame for his implosion. And dad, the same man who sighed into the phone like I was being unreasonable, was now framing me as the missing glue. I almost laughed, but it came out more like a scoff. How quickly absence turns into scapegoating. I stood in the small kitchen, sipping my coffee as I scrolled through the avalanche of guilt tripping. Mia's message stuck out the most. She'd been complicit in all this, smiling, nodding, helping plan a party she knew I wasn't invited to. Now she wanted comfort, a band-aid, a referee. I didn't reply. Instead, I grabbed a pen and a small notepad from my travel bag and began writing just 3 words at the top of the page: no more fixing. Underneath, I started a list. Every time I bailed Ryan out, every moment I let my needs come second, every time I swallowed resentment to keep the peace. The list grew fast, too fast. By the time I zipped up my ski jacket and headed for the slopes, the adrenaline had nowhere else to go but into the snow. I took a blue run, faster than I should have, cutting turns with an edge of anger that made my instructor Sam raise an eyebrow when he spotted me later. You skiing to outrun something, he asked, or someone I didn't answer. I just nodded at the lift. Again. He didn't press, he just followed, letting the silence stretch. At the summit, the world looked sharp and endless. The wind howled. Unbothered by my family's dysfunction, I inhaled deeply, then let it go. Carving down the slope with a speed that made my legs ache and my eyes water. I wasn't running, I was releasing. Later that afternoon, back at the cabin, my phone buzzed with a text from Tara. Grandma just went full scorched earth on Ryan. You need to hear this. I FaceTimed her, and she answered immediately, practically vibrating with secondhand chaos. Okay, she started. So get this, Grandma stood up in front of everyone still at the house and said, and I quote, "This is what happens when you turn your back on blood. Bad spirits follow." I blinked. She said, "What now?" "Yep." Tara cackled. She called Ryan cursed, said you were the only one who ever held this family together and were reaping what we sowed. Then she told Dad to stop hiding behind his golden boy and start parenting the wreck he raised. I nearly choked on my coffee. She actually said that word for word. Tara grinned. Uncle Pete filmed it. He said he's making it a ringtone. My jaw dropped. Grandma was never one to pick sides. She usually stayed above the drama with a passive-aggressive plate of cookies. But not this time. This time. She'd taken a flamethrower to the family mythos. It was absurd. It was glorious. And it was the first time I didn't feel alone in this mess. I ended the call, heart pounding not from anxiety, but something else. Validation. Maybe. Or the heady thrill of watching people finally see what I'd carried for years. That night, I went back to the bar. Same stool, same whiskey. The guitarist recognized me and gave a nod. The Seattle couple from a few nights ago waved me over again. I joined them. And before long, we were laughing about ski wipeouts and the best hot toddies in the state. I told them about Grandma's speech in vague terms, and the guy raised his glass. To curses, he said, "May they land where they belong." We clinked. I savored the taste of it. But as the night wore on and the laughter faded into the hum of jazz and wind against the windows, something twisted low in my chest. Not regret, not anymore, but a bittersweet ache, like mourning something I'd outgrown without realizing it. A version of me that still wanted their approval, still craved inclusion, still believed, against all evidence, that maybe this time would be different. I went back to the cabin, stood on the deck, and stared at the stars piercing the cold sky. I wondered if they were looking for me now, if Dad was pacing, blaming, if Mom was crying, if Ryan had sobered up enough to realize the damage was real and self-inflicted. I didn't wish them harm, but I wasn't going to save them either. The phone buzzed again. Another text from Ryan. "Seriously, Claire, just come home, we'll talk." I typed and deleted 3 responses before finally writing, "There's nothing left to say." I hit send and blocked his number. Then Dad's, then Mom's. The silence afterward was the loudest thing I'd ever heard, and the most peaceful. Still, a small, cruel part of me wanted them to suffer a little longer, to sit in the discomfort, to wonder how the fixer broke free, because breaking wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And the storm wasn't over yet. Tuesday dawned quieter than expected. The storm that had raged in my chest for days had blown itself out into something colder, calmer, almost surgical. I no longer felt the need to defend myself, or even to explain. I had chosen distance, and that distance was finally paying emotional dividends. I brewed coffee, wrapped myself in my thick robe, and stepped out onto the deck. The mountains stretched out before me, blanketed in fresh snow, still untouched in the morning light. Somewhere below those peaks, my family was unraveling, and for once, I wasn't the one stitching the seams. Mid-sip, a message from Tara popped up. "You need to see this." I sighed, thumb hovering over the screen. Curiosity won. She'd sent a short video clip. I tapped play. It opened with a shaky shot of Ryan standing in our parents' living room, arm in a sling, trying to explain himself to a crowd of furious, uncomfortable relatives. "It wasn't that serious," he muttered. "I just had too much to drink. Everyone's making this bigger than it is." The camera angle shifted, and suddenly Grandma was in frame, fire in her eyes. "You disgraced yourself," she snapped. "You dishonored your sister and turned a celebration into a shame." Gasps echoed. Ryan looked like he'd been slapped. I rewatched it twice. It was like watching a paper tiger finally collapse. For years, Ryan had cruised on charm, on Dad's blind pride and Mom's emotional cover-ups. But now, under scrutiny, he looked small, lost, and for once, no one was coming to save him. Tara texted again. "They've turned on each other. Mom's not speaking to Dad. Mia went back to her parents. And Ryan, He hasn't left his room since yesterday. I should have felt triumphant. Maybe a part of me did. But the bigger part, the clearer one, just felt done. I no longer needed their chaos. I didn't need their apologies, either. Not anymore. Instead, I packed a small backpack, grabbed a map from the front desk, and asked the lodge staff about backcountry trails. A guy named Eric handed me a trail guide and offered to take me out on a private hike. "Sunset up at Blue Rock is worth the climb," he said with a grin. I nodded. "Let's go." The hike was steep and cold, but invigorating. Each step away from the lodge, from the texts and the noise, was a step back toward myself. I talked to Eric about everything but family. He didn't pry. We talked about weather patterns, avalanche safety, how he'd left Denver after a bad breakup and never looked back. Mountains are honest. He said, people aren't. I didn't disagree. At the summit, the view hit like a punch to the chest. The world stretched out in pinks and golds and deep, endless white. I sat on a rock and let the silence soak into my bones. Eric wandered a few feet away, giving me space, and I finally let myself feel it. Not grief, not anger, but freedom. Not a metaphor, not aspirational, real, earned. When we hiked down, he said something that stuck with me. "You've got the look of someone who's finally off the hook." I smiled. I cut the line myself. Back at the cabin, I ignored the missed calls from Dad and the voicemail from Mom that probably started with Claire. "I know you're upset, but," and ended with her crying. I didn't care. I didn't need to hear another plea wrapped in manipulation. Instead, I posted a photo from the summit. You can't find peace where you're expected to be silent. No caption, no tags, just truth. The likes flooded in. Comments too from coworkers, old college friends, even my therapist colleague Marcy Dam. "Claire, that's poetry." Maybe it was. That night, Tara sent one last update: family meeting tomorrow night. Dad's calling it an intervention. Grandma's refusing to attend. "I'm only going for the snacks." "You in?" I laughed, out loud, then replied, "Nah, I've got a better view." I shut my phone off after that, not just silent off, because I didn't need to hear what came next. I already knew. They'd fight, they'd point fingers, Ryan would cry, Dad would blame me, Mom would beg for unity, and none of it would change what had been broken long before any party invite. What they didn't understand, what they never really grasped, was that the silence I gave them wasn't a punishment. It was a warning, a line in the snow, and they'd already crossed it. Wednesday arrived without drama. No buzz of notifications, no messages, no pity texts. It was the first day in years that my name wasn't being pulled into a crisis I didn't cause. The cabin was bathed in the kind of golden light that made even the steam from my coffee feel cinematic. I stood barefoot on the deck, mountains unfolding in quiet glory, and for once, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to ruin it. That was the real shift, wasn't it? Not the absence of chaos, but the absence of expectation. I wasn't on call anymore for Ryan's screw-ups, for Mom's mediations, or for Dad's gaslighting rationalizations. That role had expired the moment I didn't show up to be humiliated. I checked my flight details and saw the return was set for Friday. Just 2 more days. But my gut tugged with the thought, why even go back? The apartment in San Diego felt sterile now. Work was fine, fulfilling even, but it didn't feel like mine. The idea of returning to the same routine after everything I'd mentally broken free from felt regressive. Over brunch at the lodge, thick-cut bacon, sourdough toast, eggs still steaming, Tara texted, "So, last night was nuclear." Dad and Ryan screamed at each other in front of everyone. Mom fainted. Like, full collapse. Grandma blamed it on sins of the house, and someone called an Uber for the priest. I nearly choked on my coffee. She added a follow-up. Also, Ryan's engagement is off. Mia's mom came and took her home. She's filing for a restraining order, apparently. He threw his phone at a wall near her head. "You missed the purge." I read the messages again slowly. Not for schadenfreude, okay, maybe a little, but more for confirmation. That I'd been right to leave, that detaching hadn't been an abandonment, it had been survival, and sometimes, survival means leaving people to choke on the mess they made. Later that afternoon, I took another hike with Eric. We didn't talk much, just walked, letting the silence stretch between the pines and the powder. He asked if I was heading back soon. Supposed to, I said, but I'm not sure yet. He nodded. Take your time. You don't owe anyone your return. That line stayed with me. Back at the cabin, I curled up by the fireplace and wrote a list in my journal, not of tasks or to-dos, but boundaries, real ones. For the first time in my life, I put into words the things I would no longer carry. I will not answer calls that begin with, "Can you just..." I will not be guilted into family events under the guise of obligation. I will not apologize for stepping away from dysfunction I didn't create. The list became a manifesto, and with each item, I felt lighter. That night, I let myself cry not out of sadness, but release, like shedding dead weight I didn't realize was still clinging. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was clean. That's the only word that fit, and for the first time, I slept a full 8 hours, dreamless, undisturbed. Thursday, I booked a 1-month extension at the lodge. Same cabin, same view. A new routine began to form: ski runs in the morning, journaling in the afternoon, whiskey by the fire at night. I sketched again, designs for my own stationery line, a dream I'd shelved for years. No one asked me to prioritize them anymore. That silence gave me space to remember who I was. Then came the letter. Friday morning, Tara forwarded me a picture of an envelope dropped off at my San Diego apartment, my name on it, in Dad's handwriting. No return address. He left it with your landlord. She texted, didn't say a word. I stared at the screen for minutes. Something in my chest braced for impact. I had her open it. The letter was scanned and sent in 2 parts. The first read like a lukewarm apology. Claire, I know you're upset. We didn't mean to exclude you. I thought you'd understand. Space was tight. Ryan had a lot going on. You've always been the strong one. I stopped reading there. Because that was the problem. Wasn't it the mythology they'd crafted for me, the dependable one, the calm one? The fixer wasn't love, it was utility. I wasn't a daughter, I was a function. Tara asked if I wanted the second page. I told her to burn it. Saturday morning, I walked out into the snow without my phone, without a map. I let the mountain guide me, and I thought of something Eric had said on our last hike. Mountains are honest. They don't shrink to make you comfortable. They don't bend for your excuses. They rise, without apology. When I returned, wind-chapped and clear-headed, I opened my laptop and started designing my business site. Claire Morgan Studio, personalized stationery for real stories. My tagline wrote itself, you write the ending, fitting. I thought, fitting as hell. On Sunday, the lodge had live music again. Same guitarist. I wore red lipstick and ordered a whiskey neat. A couple from Oregon sat beside me and struck up conversation. Here alone, the woman asked. I smiled. No, I'm here with myself. That night, I posted one final photo, a snowy slope under starlight with the caption, some reunions are with the version of yourself you forgot to honor. And then I turned my phone off again. Because I didn't need their closure. I had mine. Story 2. The dust danced like ghosts that hadn't yet made peace. Curling up from the dirt road in front of me, noon hit, and the courthouse bell cut through the thick heat, loud enough to silence even the muttered bartering in the town square. I had no intention of staying long, just needed a wagon axle and some feed, but the crowd said otherwise. There was a tension in the air, not just heat, something rotten and sweet, like meat left out too long. I stood under the shade of Wilbur's store awning, chewing stale tobacco and regretting the ride in. My boots were worn to the sole, my patience thinner. That's when I heard the voice, smooth, slippery, selling something he had no business selling. I turned toward the platform. 3 women stood there, hands bound, postures slumped from long hours and longer lives. 2 of them were older, maybe kitchen help or laundry staff, their hands twisted by years of scalds and strain. But the third, she was different. She was younger, barefoot, a sack pulled over her head like they were ashamed to look her in the eye, or maybe they didn't want her to look back. The auctioneer grinned. Got a rare one here today. Boys, quiet type. Comes with a bonus month-old baby tucked under that shawl. 2 for 1. If you've got coin or whiskey to trade. Laughter. Low. Mean. One man near the front whistled. Another muttered something about curses and ghosts. A third said he'd bid just to shut her up. Only she hadn't said a damn word. But I felt it, the air changed, my skin bristled. And then I heard it, soft, barely above the wind. "Don't let them take my child." That voice, I hadn't heard it in 2 decades, but it carved straight through me like a hot knife. Before I could stop myself, I stepped forward, boots thudding on dry earth. I didn't care who stared. I didn't care what they thought. I only cared about the woman under that sack. The auctioneer squared his stance like I'd interrupted his sermon. "You bidding or causing trouble? Take the sack off." "Excuse me." I said, "Take it off." He hesitated, then yanked it away with a showman's flourish. Sunlight caught her face and I dropped to my knees. It wasn't because she was beautiful, though there was strength in her jaw, in the way she held the baby, asleep and oblivious. It was her eyes, green, sharp, watchful. I'd seen them before, on a trail 20 years back, carrying a girl through smoke and ash as her aunt bled out in my arms. I thought she died that night, thought the raiders took her, burned her down like the others. But she was here, alive, shackled, and still watching. Someone asked, "You know her?" I did, once, long time ago. I stood, my hands shook. The crowd leaned in like we were a circus act. "I'm buying her," I said. "She's not registered. You didn't sign the list." "Don't need a damn list." The sheriff stepped forward, lean, gray-stubbled, with a toothpick where his conscience used to be. "You causing a fuss." "Quinn." No fuss, just paying my dues." I dropped a leather pouch on the boards. Gold coins spilled out, clinking like a sermon bell, enough to buy every soul on that stage. The sheriff whistled low. "Well, hell, ain't every day a man overpays. She's yours. For now." I stepped up and reached for her gently. She flinched but didn't move, didn't speak. The baby squirmed and opened its eyes gray. My sister's eyes. My dead sister. The sheriff squinted. "Kid looks familiar." "Does it matter?" I asked. He said nothing. As we turned to leave, a man in a black duster leaned against a post near the edge of the crowd. "She was promised to me," he said. I didn't stop walking. "Then you should have brought more coin." "Shaw, she's not worth coin." "Not to you," I said, "but to me?" "She's a mark," he snapped. "You'll regret this." I've regretted worse. We passed the edge of town just as the bell struck once more sharp, cold, final. I felt May know. She went by something else now, surely sway behind me in the saddle. Her arms curled around the child like armor. I didn't speak. She didn't either. But that silence felt like the beginning of something. We reached the bluff just before sundown. The mare moved slow, steady, like she knew the burden she carried wasn't just weight, it was memory, the kind you don't speak of unless forced. May was behind me, holding on but not tightly. Not like trust, more like resignation. The land spread out beneath us like a frayed quilt, my old ranch in the distance. More bones than house now. I'd let it fall quiet after the war, never felt much like rebuilding, but now, maybe it could offer something other than ghosts. When we got to the barn, I slid off first and offered her my hand. She didn't take it right away. Then, slowly, she handed me the child. He looked up at me with those same steel-gray eyes that ran in my bloodline, eyes that didn't blink even when the wind kicked up dust around us. I led them inside. The hay was dry. I'd cleaned the place a few weeks ago, not knowing why. Maybe I'd been waiting. She sat down on a feed sack, rocking the baby slow, didn't speak, just stared at the ground like she was trying to remember how to belong to it. "You remember me?" I finally asked. Her gaze lifted. Those eyes hadn't lost their weight. She nodded once. "You remember what happened at the creek? The night the fires came?" Another nod, slower this time. "I ran." She didn't flinch, didn't need to. I'd said the thing we both carried. "I thought you were dead." She looked down at the baby, fingers brushing his cheek. "They left me. I hid under the stove. Someone found me a day later." I sat across from her, the weight of it all pressing against my ribs. And then, her voice was hoarse, like it had grown rusty from disuse. "They sold me to a trader, then again, to a rancher out west. When I turned 16, I was already on my third name." The child whimpered, then settled again. She held him tighter. "I don't even know who I am anymore," she said. But they called me Mira, that's what I answered to. Mira, I repeated. It didn't sound like her, but maybe that's what survival sounds like. She looked up. He's not mine, the boy. I blinked, but they gave him to me after his birth mother died. Said he cried too much with everyone else. With me. He was quiet, so they made me keep him. Carry him. Feed him. I stared at the little boy. He looks like family. Maybe, she said, maybe that's what scared them. What do you mean? She pulled her sleeve back. That same brand, a broken circle with a twisted cross, red and puckered. They call it the claim. The word sat ugly in the air. They mark us with it. Once you have it, your property, that's the rule. If you escape, they hunt you. If you fight, they break you. My jaw tightened. I've seen that brand. I said, my sister. She ran off with a man once. We found her body in the canyon. That same symbol carved into the rock nearby. Mira swallowed. They don't just kill, they erase names, faces, families. Who are they? She shook her head. I never saw the top of the chain, just the men with sticks and dogs. And one man they all answered to. Always wore gray. Called himself Creed. My blood ran cold. Ryland Creed. She nodded. I stood up too fast and paced the barn. Dust curled up around my boots. I knew him. Years ago. He worked the southern lines. Real estate, trade, real smooth talker. My sister met him once. He promised her land. I never saw her again. The air felt tighter. Mira's voice was soft. They want the boy, not because he's valuable, but because he's free. He was born without chains, and they can't stand that. I sat back down. We can't stay here, I said. They'll come. I know, she said. They always do. I watched her for a long while. Her shoulders were tired, but they hadn't dropped. She wasn't broken, just buried. There's a place, I said. Old mission house, maybe half a day's ride from here. No one goes anymore. Roof still holds. We can rest. Hide. And after that, I don't know. She didn't look away. I'm tired of hiding. I nodded. Me too. That night we didn't speak much. The wind moved through the barn boards like it was looking for a place to settle. I gave her my coat. She didn't say thank you, just wrapped it around the child and leaned back against the wood, watching the shadows dance. In the morning, we left early. No fire, no trail. The road was hard and full of quiet. We reached the mission just before the sky cracked open. Lightning licked the hills behind us, and the first drops of rain hit like pebbles. Inside, the stone walls held, though the air smelled of dust and forgotten prayers. I got a fire going. Mira tucked the child into a corner where the wind couldn't reach. We didn't speak until dark fully fell. Why'd you do it? She asked. I looked up. By me, step onto that platform. I stared into the fire. I didn't know it was you. Not at first, but I knew it wasn't right. I've seen wrong before. Plenty of it. But this felt like something sacred being torn. She said nothing, but I felt her listening. You looked like someone I failed once. I added, turns out, you were… Silence stretched between us. Then, I thought you forgot me, she whispered. Never. She turned to the fire. When they dragged me out from under that stove, I didn't scream. I just thought, he ran. I held on to that. For a while, I hated you, but mostly, I hated that I still hoped you'd come back. I closed my eyes. The fire cracked like breaking bones. I'm here now, I said, if it matters. She didn't answer, but later, as the child stirred in sleep, I felt her sit a little closer. That was enough. By dawn, the fire had gone to coals. Mira sat with the boy pressed against her, both of them asleep. I watched them for a while, not moving, not speaking, just breathing slow. You ever sit so still, the world forgets you're there? That's how I felt, not hidden, not scared, just outside of time. But peace never stays. Before the sun cleared the ridge, I saw it, dust on the northern trail, too steady for wild horses, too quiet for riders out hunting game. One rider, clean path, purpose in the hoofbeats. I didn't need to guess. I stood, grabbed the rifle, and stepped outside. The chapel door swung with the wind behind me. He stopped 20 paces out, tall, gray coat, clean boots, A man who hadn't worked a day with his hands but knew how to order others to bleed? Ryland Creed. He looked at me like I was something on the bottom of his boot. "You're Elias Quinn," he said, not a question. "I am." "Sure, you've got something that belongs to me." I didn't lower the rifle. "I've got a woman and a child who belong to no one." He smiled. Not the kind that reaches the eyes, just the kind that means trouble's already loaded in the chamber. "I branded her," he said. "I fed her, kept her alive. She's mine." "She was never yours," I said. "You kept her in chains, called it kindness." Creed's smile faded. "You think this ends in conversation?" "No," I said, "but I wanted to give you one chance to turn around." His hand twitched near his coat. I didn't wait. I fired. He ducked, but the bullet grazed his shoulder. He swore and stumbled, falling off the saddle. I moved quick, boots hitting mud, rifle up again. From the rocks to the west, more movement his men. 2, maybe 3. Figures always travel in shadows. Gunfire broke out. I rolled behind the wagon wreck we'd used to block the trail. The chapel shook as bullets ripped through old stone. Inside, Mira screamed, but not in fear. In rage. I heard her fire back, one clean shot, then another. The child wailed, sharp and high like thunder without rain. I took aim and picked off the second shooter. He dropped near the rocks. The third didn't wait. His horse peeled off, rider bent low. "Coward!" I moved toward Creed. He was crawling, trying to reach his pistol. I kicked it away. He looked up, face pale, red leaking through his sleeve. "You don't know what you're doing," he hissed. "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said. "You'll bring the rest of them down on your head." "I'm counting on it." I raised the rifle. Creed didn't beg. He spat blood and whispered, "She's already ruined." That's what did it. The trigger pulled itself. His body dropped. Silence followed, deep, like the land held its breath. I turned back to the chapel. Mira stood in the doorway, rifle still smoking. Her hair was wild, face streaked with ash. The baby in her arm had gone quiet. We didn't speak. Didn't need to. That night, we burned the mission. Not just for the trail it left, but for what it had held. The ghosts, the weight, the hiding. We left nothing but stone behind. We moved again, this time farther south. I had a place in mind, an old miner's cabin nestled in a pine hollow. No one had used it in years. Roof sagged, door hung crooked, but it was ours now. And no one knew it but us. We laid low. Mira started to speak more. She didn't tell stories not the way most do, but she let things slip. The way the boy liked the sound of frogs. The way she used to braid grass into little dolls when she was scared. We worked the land together. Planted seeds. Built a fence. He grew stronger. First steps, first words. Ma, then Doc. That's what he called me. No one corrected him. One night, as we sat near the fire, I asked her something that had been sitting in my chest like a stone. "Do you want to keep running?" She shook her head. "I want to raise him, without fear, without shame. Then we'll need to make a choice." "What kind? Do we disappear completely, Bo, or do we make sure they never come again?" She was quiet a long time. "Then you want to kill the root?" I nodded. "Then we go back north," she said. "We go to the heart." Creed wasn't the top, just a limb on a rotten tree. The roots ran through old towns and quiet backroom deals. There was a name Mira remembered, an accountant, a quiet man who kept the records and arranged the trades. We found him. He worked out of a storehouse near Phelan's Crossing. We didn't storm the place. We walked in during daylight. I held the door. Mira held the boy. The man looked up and froze. "You remember her?" I asked. He paled. I don't want trouble." "Then speak." We took what we needed: names, ledgers, routes, a whole map of the operation. It was bigger than we thought. Wider. But not untouchable. We left him alive. Made sure he knew silence was no longer his shield. That week, we rode to the nearest town with a telegraph. I sent 3 messages, one to a marshal I trusted, one to a reporter who owed me a favor, and one to a preacher who used to run safe houses for runaway women. By winter's end, the flames had spread farther than Creed ever dreamed. People talked. Names were named. And the brands, they stopped being silent. One morning, Mira stood on the porch, the child at her feet. I came out with coffee. She looked at me. "I want to take your name," she said. "You don't have to," I replied. "I know, that's why I want to." I didn't say anything right away, just reached for her hand. We buried her old name in the ground, carved a new one in the wood above the door, Mira Quinn. Years passed. The child grew tall, strong, smart. He asked questions about the scar on Mira's wrist once. She didn't hide, didn't flinch, just said, "That's where I was claimed by others." But this, she touched her chest. "This is where I claimed myself." And when he asked who I was, I said, "I'm the man who came late, but stayed." And that was enough. The past doesn't vanish, but it can be planted deep enough that it feeds new roots. And sometimes, if you water it with truth and hold it close with love, it grows into something that forgets how to bleed. The years didn't come all at once. They crept in slowly, like the way sunlight crawls across the floorboards of an old house. You don't notice change until one day. You look up, and the child who couldn't speak without crying is asking you why the sky turns orange before a storm. And you don't have an answer, but you realize he trusts you to try. That boy, our boy, grew up in the quiet, not silence, never silence. The birds had their songs, the trees had their own wind. Mira had her voice again. She sang to him sometimes, soft and low, like it wasn't even about words, just melody, memory. The hum of survival turned into lullaby. I built the porch wider that spring. Mira liked to sit with her feet on the rail and her face in the sun. Said the warmth made her forget how cold the cages were. We planted a willow by the creek. She told me stories I hadn't heard, not all the ugly ones, just the small pieces she kept safe for herself. A girl once called May, who used to catch frogs in her shoes and tell the wind her secrets. A girl who thought she'd died a dozen times but somehow kept coming back. "I thought I was gone," she told me once, but then I saw him, our boy, and I realized I was still breathing, still here. I didn't say anything, just placed my hand over hers. That was enough. Trouble never vanished, just waited. About 3 winters after Creed fell, word came through a rancher out of Dry Hollow. The last trading camp on the northern line had gone dark, burned down. No survivors. At first, I felt relief, then suspicion. "Too clean," Mira said, "like someone's burying tracks." We heard whispers, a man calling himself Mercer, gathering the remnants of Creed's operation, said he didn't believe in brands, just obedience. His camps were mobile, his buyers silent. He didn't want to own people, he wanted to erase them. "You think he'll come south?" I asked. Mira nodded. "They always do." So we prepared, quietly, patiently. Not with guns, not at first. With letters. We wrote to women Mira had known, those who'd gotten out, some barely, some who changed names and built lives like we had. We asked if they'd join us, just for one day, just to speak. That spring, they came, 6 of them. Some brought daughters, one brought a rifle, another brought a small jar of ash, said it was her sister. We met down by the river bend, where the cottonwoods leaned low and the water ran cold but steady. No sheriff, no judges, just us. They told their truths. Mira spoke last. "I was taken at 11. She said, I forgot my own name, but I never forgot the smell of pine, or how it felt when someone called me worth saving." She looked at me, then at the boy, now almost 8, skipping stones without a care in the world. "We don't owe them fear anymore," she said. "We owe each other fire and roots." That summer, we formed what folks started calling the Quiet Trail. Wasn't much. Just a network of safe houses stretching from the southern ranches to the mountain passes. No names, no addresses, just signs etched in bark or scratched in stone, a half circle and a line crossing through it, once a brand, now a warning. "We are not yours." The preacher from Carson Bluff helped discreetly. A woman from a mining town in the west sent food each month. People who owed nothing gave what they could. Mira kept records, hidden in the wall behind our hearth. She said one day, the boy would read them and know the cost of silence and the power of voice. We didn't teach him to hate. We taught him to listen. Sometimes, at night, I'd hear him crying, not loud, just soft. One night I asked, "You dreaming, son?" He nodded. "They come for Mama," he said, "but I can't find you." I wrapped him up in my arms. "They won't take her again," I said, "and if they ever try, they'll meet me first." He buried his face in my chest. You promise? I pulled him back just enough to look in his eyes. I've only made 3 promises in my life, I said, and I've kept them all. The next spring, Mira stood at the porch's edge. Her hair streaked silver now. She watched the trail bend disappear behind blooming dogwoods. They're getting closer, she said. I didn't ask how she knew. Some folks read maps. Mira read wind and silence. So we packed again. Not because we were afraid, because it was time to bring the fight where it started. We rode out at first light, just me, Mira, and the boy. A new safe house had gone cold. A woman named Elsie never sent word. We didn't know what we'd find. What we found was ash. Charred wood, a kettle still blackened on the rocks, no blood, no signs of struggle, just gone. The boy stepped closer, his mouth tight. Where is she? He whispered. Mira knelt, touched the earth. She ran. How do you know? She left tracks, but not ones they'd see. This, she said, drawing a small spiral in the soot, is ours. We followed that spiral across 2 counties, through ravines, over dry riverbeds, each time. Another symbol left behind a feather under a rock, 3 pine cones stacked at a fork. And then the cabin. Elsie stood outside, alive, but not alone. Mercer had followed her. Only this time, he hadn't come with guns. He came with gold, promises, paper signed by lawyers. He stood on her porch, holding a ledger. I'm buying this land, he said when we rode up. The woman's free to go. She was never yours to free, I told him. You're trespassing. I smiled. So are you. Behind me, Mira raised her rifle. The boy held the reins steady. Mercer's men saw our eyes and left. He didn't. Who are you people? He asked, his voice tight. Mira stepped forward. We're the ones who don't forget. We didn't shoot him. Didn't burn his papers. We followed him back to town, took his name to the preacher, to the marshal, to the widow who'd lost 2 daughters to Creed's old trade line. They made it official. Property seized. Operation ended. Name blacklisted from the territory. No revenge. Just remembrance. Back home, we walked the long trail up the ridge. The boy raced ahead, wild and free. Mira walked beside me, her hand in mine. You ever think we'd get this far? She asked. I looked at the horizon, where the mountains caught the clouds like prayers finally answered. I hoped, I said, but hope's only half the work. She nodded. Let's build something new, she said. We did. And when the time came, and the boy asked what we'd name it, I told him where the river knows our names, because that's how stories live. Not in blood, not in fire, but in the places we carve from silence and choose never to leave behind. Story 3: The wind that night didn't just blow it cut. I was halfway up a mountain trail, leading my old mule through knee-deep slush, soaked to the bone, when I caught the scent of burning cedar. It was faint, but clean, in weather like that. Fire wasn't just comfort, it was life. My name's Maddox Boone. I'm 42, used to be a ranch hand, served in the war, now mostly drift between places. No one looks twice at me, and I prefer it that way. That night, I didn't expect shelter. I didn't expect anything but cold. But then I saw a cabin, half covered in snow, quiet except for the wind shrieking through the chimney. The mule turned toward it without waiting for me. That's what saved both our lives. I knocked once. No answer. I pushed the door open and stepped into a barely lit room. There was fire in the stove, low but real, and a woman on the floor, chained by the wrist to the stove, half conscious and soaked through. She was young, maybe 24, barefoot, bruised and bleeding. She was also very pregnant. Her first words, "Don't call the sheriff." That told me everything I needed to know. I dropped to one knee, checked her pulse, cold but strong. She looked like she'd been left there to die. I asked for her name. She whispered, "Mercy." The chain was old, bolted into the back of the stove. I found a hatchet, pried the wood behind the iron until the whole bolt came loose. It took effort, but I wasn't about to leave her there. I lifted her to the straw mattress. It was filthy, but better than the floor. I gave her water, wrapped her in my coat, and stoked the fire high. I've delivered calves. That was the extent of my midwifery experience. but I figured birth is birth messy, painful, and inevitable. She was in labor, early, from the look of it, scared, but not soft. Between contractions, she told me more. Her name was Mercy Harrow. She'd come west with a man named Thatch Heller. He wasn't her husband, just a preacher with a charming voice and a talent for manipulation. Claimed he was part Comanche, part minister. He was neither. At first, he helped her, chopped wood, fixed her fence. Then he started staying too long. Said she owed him for his protection. When she resisted, he didn't hit her. He did something worse, convinced the town she was unstable, dangerous. He told everyone she was carrying his child. She wasn't. He didn't care. He tied her up and said he'd be back for the baby when it was born. I listened. I didn't interrupt, because honestly, it sounded like something I should have stopped years ago and didn't. That night, she went in and out of consciousness. I kept her warm, fed the fire, and sat close. She didn't ask for help again, but she didn't tell me to leave, either. In the morning, the snow had stopped. I boiled water, cleaned towels, did what I could to make the place halfway decent. She asked why I was helping. I told her, because last time I didn't. She didn't ask what I meant, but I think she understood. Later that day, we heard hooves crunching snow outside. 2 men, one was Sheriff Tobin, the other was Thatch. They didn't knock, just stood outside, demanding she come out, said she'd been abducted. Tobin didn't know the truth. Thatch had twisted it so it looked like I'd kidnapped her. Mercy looked at me and said, "They'll take him if they get inside." I didn't hesitate. I killed the fire, so they couldn't see shadows. Told her to stay quiet. She didn't like it, but she trusted me enough to listen. We stayed that way through the night, quiet, cold, and ready. They didn't come in that night. Sheriff Tobin and Thatch stood outside long enough to make their presence known, then left. Probably figured freezing us out would be easier than forcing their way in. Mercy didn't sleep much, neither did I. She was deep into labor by dawn, real contractions, close together. She kept her voice low, biting the blanket when the pain crested. I sat by the mattress, feeding the fire and whispering counts under my breath. We didn't talk about what would happen after. Didn't talk about the men outside, or what Thatch might try next. All that mattered in those hours was keeping her alive long enough to bring a new life into the world. She gripped my arm during the worst of it, said things I don't think she remembered later. I listened. I stayed. When the time came, I helped her sit forward and push. It wasn't fast or quiet or clean, but eventually, the cabin filled with the sharp sound of a crying infant, a boy, red and healthy. I wrapped him in my coat, tied the cord, and placed him in Mercy's arms. She didn't say anything at first, just stared down at him like she was seeing something impossible. Then she whispered, "He's mine." It wasn't a statement, it was a promise. I stepped outside and buried the afterbirth under the old pine. Same way I'd done for animals back when I ran herds in Utah. Life comes into the world and something else has to leave. That's the cost. When I came back in, Mercy was asleep, baby tucked against her chest. She looked stronger somehow, like surviving that had burned away whatever was holding her back. I sat down, watched the snow start again, and waited. Because I knew this wasn't over. Sure enough, they returned the next day. Sheriff Tobin came alone this time, on a sleigh, bringing with him a midwife from town, Fern, and the town preacher, a skinny man named Russell who looked like he couldn't stomach his own sermons. They came inside without waiting for an invitation. "Got some things to clear up," Tobin said. Mercy sat upright on the mattress, baby in her lap. She didn't look scared, just tired. Tobin held out a folded piece of paper. "Thatch filed a formal complaint, says you ran off with his child, that you threatened him, said you were unstable." He tied me to a stove. She said flatly. Fern raised her eyebrows, but didn't write anything. "You got proof?" Tobin asked. I stood up. I cut the chain myself. The sheriff shrugged. "Don't matter what you say, the town's asking for a hearing." Russell opened his Bible but didn't read, just held it in his lap like it might ward off truth. "She's not going anywhere," I said. "I'm not here to drag her off." Tobin replied, "Just letting her know the vote's coming. Town'll decide what's best for the child." "What does that mean?" Mercy asked. Fern spoke up this time. "If they don't believe your story, the boy could be placed elsewhere, somewhere, more stable." That landed like a punch to the gut. They'd take him, Mercy asked. Tobin didn't answer directly. Depends how things go. After they left, Mercy was quiet for a long time, just sat there with the baby, rocking gently. They won't believe me, she said. You don't know that. I do, she said. I've seen how men like Thatch work. They charm, they twist, and folks eat it up because it's easier than facing the truth. I had no argument, she was right. But I also wasn't going to let it happen again. I'll speak, I said. I'll tell them what I saw. She looked at me, tired and wary. You think that matters? I think silence is what got us here. Over the next few days, she recovered slow, her fever broke, she could walk again, shaky but upright. The baby, she named him Elias, stayed healthy, strong lungs and a good appetite. I rebuilt part of the stove wall, fixed the hinges on the door, kept the fire going. The weather had turned, and the worst of the snow seemed to be behind us. But the pressure hadn't lifted. The hearing was scheduled for Friday, held in the old meeting hall that used to be a church before the town grew cynical. I offered to go alone, but she said no. If I don't stand for myself now, I never will. So that morning, she put on the cleanest dress she had, wrapped Elias in a blanket, and we rode into town in silence. The room was packed. Not out of support, just curiosity. People wanted a show. Wanted to see the girl who'd caused trouble. Wanted to see if the preacher's golden boy had really been crossed. Tobin presided. Fern sat with her notes, and Russell stood by like a statue. Thatch wasn't there yet. Mercy was called first. She stood, holding Elias, and told them everything. Not just the violence, not just the chain, but the manipulation, the gaslighting, the way Thatch had convinced her he was a savior until she said no. Some people squirmed, some stared. One woman actually cried. Then Thatch walked in, clean-shaven, coat buttoned tight. He looked every inch the model citizen. She's lying, he said. She ran off, told me she'd kill the child if I tried to stop her. I tried to help. I prayed for her. Then he pulled out a folded letter, claimed it was from her, said it proved she was unstable. No one read it. Didn't matter. The lie was planted. Mercy didn't say anything. But I did. You tied her to a stove. I said, I saw the chain. I cut her loose. I helped her deliver a child in a freezing cabin you left her to die in. Thatch's face turned red. This man's a drifter, a nobody. You gonna take his word over mine? I'm not asking you to take my word. I said, I'm asking you to look her in the eye and tell her she doesn't deserve to raise her son. No one spoke. Then Mercy stepped forward, held Elias out, gently. He's mine, she said, and no one's taking him. The vote was quiet. No raised hands, just scribbled paper and nervous glances. In the end, it was Fern who stood and read the results. She stays. The child stays. No charges. Tobin looked like he didn't want to say it, but he nodded. You're free to go. Thatch stormed out. Russell didn't look up once. On the ride back, Mercy didn't talk much, but at one point, as we neared the cabin, she turned to me. Why'd you do it? She asked. Do what? Stay. I thought about it a moment. Because I've let bad men talk louder than good women too many times. I'm done doing that. She nodded, didn't say anything else. That night, we built the fire higher than usual. She laid Elias down between us on the mattress. I sat in the old chair by the stove, watching them breathe. Outside, the wind had finally stopped. A week after the vote, we were still standing barely. The town didn't say much. No one came to congratulate her. No casseroles, no flowers, no welcome back smiles. But they didn't try to take Elias either. And that silence, in its own way, felt like the loudest shift we could have asked for. Mercy started to heal. Her steps got steadier, her voice stronger. She began humming again low, aimless tunes, half memory, half instinct. The kind of sound a woman makes when she's trying to believe the worst is behind her. I kept working around the cabin, rebuilt part of the roof, replanted the vegetable patch, fixed the fence. Even though we didn't have animals yet, you start fixing things before you know why. Sometimes the doing is all that holds you together. One afternoon, I found her standing out in the cold with Elias swaddled against her chest, no shoes, just still as stone, looking out toward the tree line. Everything okay? I asked, stepping onto the porch. She nodded. Sometimes I need to see where the danger might come from. See any? She looked down at her son. Not today. That was the most peace either of us had admitted to since it all started. In February, Sheriff Tobin came back. He didn't knock again, but at least he looked awkward about it. I wanted to say, there won't be any appeal from Thatch. He left for good. Some say Arizona, some say Mexico. Doesn't matter now. I didn't invite him in. Just leaned against the doorframe and listened. I also wanted to say, he paused, scratched at his collar. You did the right thing, and you kept her alive. That matters. I didn't say thank you, didn't need to. He nodded once and walked away. Mercy watched from the window. When Tobin disappeared down the hill, she said, You think it's over? No, but I think it's quieter now. We didn't call ourselves a family, not at first. We didn't kiss, didn't hold hands. We just existed near each other in a way that felt safe, honest. She'd watch Elias while I worked the field. I'd cook when she was tired. We shared chores, shared silence. And some days, that felt like more love than anything I'd seen shouted from a church pew. Then one morning, she said it soft, like she wasn't sure it was allowed. I think I'm happy. It caught me off guard. I looked up from the stove, where I'd been frying cornmeal cakes, and just watched her. I don't know what to do with it, she admitted. You don't have to do anything, I said. Just keep it warm. Spring came slow. But it came, and with it, new routines. Elias started crawling. Mercy started writing again letters she never sent, but needed to put on paper. She asked if I'd teach her how to shoot. I said yes. There was no ceremony about it, no promises, no rings. But one night, she crawled into the chair beside me, curled her legs under herself, and laid her head on my shoulder. I want you to stay, she said. I already am. The town stayed distant. They didn't trust us, not fully, but they left us alone. Sometimes Fern dropped by with thread or sugar. Sometimes an old neighbor would wave from the road. But mostly, we were ghosts, the kind folks remember only in whispers. And that was fine. Mercy didn't need their forgiveness, just their silence. We gave each other the rest. I asked her once, months later, why she didn't run when she had the chance back when Thatch was still watching her, still poisoning the town against her. I wanted to, she said, but I was tired of running. I wanted to know what it felt like to hold something and not have to let go. She looked at Elias asleep in the cradle, then at me. I never knew a man could stay. She said, Me neither, I admitted. In July, a storm knocked out part of the roof again. I climbed up to fix it while Mercy handed me nails and held Elias on her hip. He was laughing, wind in his hair, like the world had never been cruel. We'd been through hell, but that laugh, that easy, bright laugh sounded like redemption. After I patched the last shingle, I sat down beside her on the porch. You ever think about what might have happened if I hadn't found you? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then no, because if I let myself think that way, I start believing I wasn't meant to survive. And I was. Yeah, I said, you were. Sometimes I dream about that night, the chain, the snow, her voice cracking through the dark. But now, when I wake up, I hear Elias breathing beside us, and I know I'm not back there anymore. That part's done. What comes next is quieter, but no less sacred. One evening, I found her on the porch again, same spot, same sky. You still looking for danger? I asked. She shook her head. No, I'm watching it leave. Then she looked over at me and smiled, a real one, the kind you don't fake. We made it, she said. Not all the way. No, she agreed, but far enough. We sat in silence as the sun dipped behind the ridge. The wind moved through the trees, soft this time, not angry, not cold. Just wind. And for the first time in a long time, we didn't flinch.